Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning.
Nice to meet you, Amanda. I feel like we've
Good to
only
see
been emailed. Joe, I don't think for some reason, I don't know who was on the invite list, but I don't think board members actually ever got one.
I just resent them.
Okay, I mean,
Just now.
oh, okay.
I know Joe actually sent those a couple of times. We don't understand yet why they didn't get to the folks who they were sent to, but I went in myself just to double check and I see where they got the invites were sent. I'm not sure why they're not showing up in the inboxes.
Are we sure?
I mean, nothing's, I haven't received anything this morning, and neither of Jennifer or Bonnie.
Let me try something else.
Okay.
Are we sure they're not going to spam for some reason?
I can look. That hasn't happened in the past. No.
Okay.
Joe, while you're in there, we might need to grab a link and email it directly to the folks. And then if we have to promote them to panelists, we will.
That's actually what I'm doing now. I'm sending a group and an invite to the Google groups for the board members and the cabinet.
Excellent. Good work, Joe.
I got in through the website, the board page website. The link is there.
Good morning.
Good morning, Patrick.
How's everyone doing on this fine Friday?
Good.
All right, I've sent the link again to the Google groups. So
Okay, so I wasn't the only one.
no, it doesn't sound like it.
Got it. Okay, thanks. Does someone have a list of the emails for those folks that we can email them as well? I know you just kicked out the links.
Let me see if
We
I
have
sent a sheet that I worked on.
Yeah. Tia sent us a sheet.
Let's see if we can kick them out an email message as well, just so they know it's coming.
Yes, sir. We talked about that right before you got on.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah, it looks like they got it. They're joining as attendees.
Hi, Amanda. Nice to see you again. Hi, Carrie. Hi, Dina.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. I'm just adding my copious notes to a Google doc that we can use as a guide today. I'm trying to decide how many of my copious notes you actually want in there. But we're just covering a lot of topics. Okay, so let's see. See Bonnie, I see Sarah's here. I know Jennifer was trying to join. Let's see what she said. Okay, yeah, I definitely got this email, Joe. So thank you for that.
Okay.
And Dr. Keeling, do you know if Dr. Felder is going to be here right at the beginning or if she's
I
joining
don't
late?
know.
Okay,
I'm gonna send out one more to everyone individually.
okay.
All right, you should all get one more invite.
Joe, this is Amanda. Was I included in the group?
Um, I actually don't think you were. Let me double check. Wait a minute.
Bonnie, would you like us to, do you think we should go ahead and start? Or do you think we should wait a little bit more? I'm not sure if we still have joining problems or,
I'm still trying to reach out to some folks.
okay.
Chair Doyle, if you'll just let me know when you're ready for me to take that down and start your meeting. I just wanted to put that up since we're streaming live.
Okay, that's great. That's very helpful. Thank you, Patrick.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry I'm late.
Good morning, Dr. Felder.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. Okay, I see Tia's on as an attendee. I don't know if she just-
I've invited her to join as a panelist. She must not be accepting the
Okay,
panelist invite.
okay, thank you. Dr. Felder, we've had a little bit of technical difficulties today, so I don't know if Melanie is not quite able to join yet because of other commitments or because of joining problems.
I believe she has another commitment, but
Okay.
Amanda Bunch is with us.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
So maybe we should go ahead and get started. What do you think?
Sure. If everyone
Okay.
else is okay with starting?
Yeah. I know Jennifer's going to be joining us intermittently, and we've exchanged some communication, so I think she should be all set to join when she's able.
I've finished sending out invites to the remaining folks, so they should hopefully join here momentarily.
Okay.
I'm going to need to step away for just a few minutes, so please continue in my absence.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Keeling and board members, I'm going to share with you this Google Doc I'm working on that we'll kind of use as to kind of just use it with our agenda today. So I'll do that while we're waiting.
And I'm here, Carrie, and I'll turn my camera on in a couple of minutes. I'm just eating some breakfast.
That's fine. Yeah, I saw you're here. Good to see you, Sarah.
And Carrie, if you want, I'll go ahead and, oh, you want to call the meeting to order? Because we can go through the minutes and get some of that done.
Yes, just 1 second and I'll do that.
Okay.
Okay. Patrick, would you mind removing that? Did you already remove that image?
I did. I took it down.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Community Engagement Committee meeting this morning. Today is Friday, February 11th, 2022, and I call this meeting to order. Community engagement ties into Strategic Plan Goal 4, in which Orange County Schools is committed to cultivate supportive partnerships among families, schools, and community stakeholders to support students' well-being and ensure all students have what they need to be successful. And we appreciate the guidance of our Chief Equity Officer, Dr. Dina Keeling today, who always helps us stay focused on our equity emphasis. So from Goal 4, identifying and removing barriers and engaging in culturally responsive practices to strengthen our connections and communications with family, students in the community. And also from Goal 3, that we're committed to being culturally proficient. And so I appreciate your continuing in board training, Dr. Keeling. Coming together to grow towards these goals can be challenging, and we always want our conversation to be respectful and to take a posture of listening. So please join me in a moment of silence to prepare ourselves for this work. Thank you. Okay, our first item on the agenda today is approving our minutes from the November 5th meeting. Bonnie, did you get a chance to read them?
Yep, they look fine.
Okay, great.
So
Have a-
motion to approve.
Second, all in favor? Aye, yay, we approved our minutes. Okay. And then our second, let's see, I need to share my screen. So. Sorry.
What is
Okay.
this?
This is because this meeting is a lot of conversation around other meetings and things we've had. I compiled everything into a document. This is basically our agenda with notes to guide our
Okay.
meeting today.
Okay, great.
And Amanda, I don't know who's taking minutes today, but I can share this document with you too. And that way the minutes are kind of in here a little bit today. Okay, so our first item is public comments, online comments, and minutes access. And I just want to go over those topics, and then I thought I could just type in here our conversation. But so on our district website is the public comment signing up for speaking in person. And what some of us might not have realized, including me, is that when we switched to the Whitted building and fewer people were able to join us in person due to occupancy, some changes were made to submitting written comments. And maybe we were told this and it was an oversight on our part as a board. But so originally, when we started inviting people to submit written public comments in 2021, I think it said on the website, they would end 3 hours before the meeting so that board members could receive them and review them. And then with the reduced occupancy, I think Patrick and Eva, maybe Melanie had a conversation about continuing the comments through the night so that people felt like they had adequate time to submit comments. And also that's something we've said, during the meeting, if someone's kind of getting out of line at the podium, part of what I'm prepared to say is you can submit your comments in writing. So we've extended that public comment in writing through the night. And so I don't think anyone really had a problem with that, except that we obviously couldn't read everything in advance of the meeting. I know we've as board members would read things the next day. And then there was one more wrinkle with that because when we had the specially called meeting, and that's right here, I made a note about this. It wasn't public comment in the same way because we weren't having public comment at the meeting. So it was really just comments sent in advance of the book meeting. And I think maybe Bonnie, you raised that question, why do these keep going to the next day? And so then Melanie ended it for us, but then we received some complaints of kind of shutting people down. So that's why it's on the agenda today, just so we're all on the same page and we've kind of come around the best decision we can. And then that all the board members know what that decision is, or if there's something we need to vote on as a board.
So Eva's not on with us, is she? Because, there's this animal called a public hearing. And I don't know, I believe that may be quasi judicial. No, actually it's not. We don't swear people in. So people can lie. Anybody could lie in a public hearing. But a public hearing is, I think people really want to get on record on their comment. And I know in other parts of government, in the Zoom world or in the virtual world, public hearings have been allowed to go till 9 a.m. or till sometime the next day. I don't know if it's noon or whatever time, sometime the next day. But it also gives the board the opportunity to cut off public comments after that, to say, we're done, this conversation is over. But so on a public hearing, I think there's a question about at some point, we're done with this topic. And that makes sense to me to continue to the next day to allow us to finish and allow the public to finish. On general comments for meetings, to me, it's really important to hear the comments before the meeting, because it's, I think, our intent to consider public comments in our deliberations, and to get them the next day in a way doesn't really make much sense. And allowing written comment and cutting that off 3 hours before feels legitimate, because it says we need time to read them. So that feels completely okay with me. So it's different meetings have different roles, and there's a question, and I have just one other comment. I would like people to identify who they are at the beginning of public comment. I'd like to know if they're stakeholders in the county or if they're from out of the county, because it's really different to me. It contextualizes their comments, so I'd like them to identify where they live and their relationship to Orange County schools, if that's possible. And I don't know, Carrie, if you could ask that as the chair, but it would be nice to know where they live, if they're a parent, teacher, if they're in the district, if they're in the county but not in the district, or if they're not in the county. That also, if you got into and I don't know, this would have to probably be a policy issue, but I have some interest in prioritizing it, because I guess the board's decided to group everybody at the beginning of the meeting. And so if you have to limit the discussion, is it just first come, first serve, or do the people with a commitment to the district or a stakeholder in the district get priority over people who don't?
Yeah, and just to add on to Bonnie's comment, that's something that I had suggested previously, I think maybe during policy committee discussions, maybe one-on-one, I forget, because some districts, and I love this, have students go first, followed by staff, followed by parents, followed by community members, followed by everybody else.
Hey, Sarah, I'm sorry, Sarah, I'm interrupting you just real quick. Bonnie, did I capture what you're saying?
No, I'm
in
not
here?
reading it. Let's see. Public hearing comments go till the next day, but board has the ability to cut off. I don't like cut off. I like to complete for a formal public hearing. I can edit this for you after. I don't know if you want to tie it up, but I don't like, it's not about cutting it off. It's about, completing the hearing. Once the hearing is over, then I think the public has the right to know it's over.
Yeah, and in Eva's not here, so I don't know the policy number, but there's a policy that talks about our different types of meetings. And there's a meeting where it's a topic of particular community interest, and we set up, I forget if it's called a public hearing or not, but there's an equivalent meeting to that we have in policy.
Yeah, and the book meeting was not, and I'm getting some comments sent to me here. We won't make decisions about this without Eva, but at least we can compile the questions we have as a board. We may have to discuss this in a full board meeting. But I do know the book meeting was not a hearing, because she made really clear with me as we were planning that meeting, like, this doesn't function. And I know you weren't saying that, Bonnie, but just to state clearly, that was not a hearing.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Right.
go ahead, Sarah.
No, absolutely. And I think I understand the public getting upset about last minute changes on how we allow comments. I think that's really legitimate. We have to be clear in ourselves what we're going to allow.
Yep. So my point just about the prioritizing, putting students first and then staff, putting some sort of order to it was just given all of the, what I heard at that point, and I forget if it was talking to you, Carrie, or Hillary, or in a policy meeting, the number of other things that you're trying to also juggle when you're the chair and you're dealing with all of that's another layer of complexity to it when you have the written comments and the in-person and the Zoom and so I'm interested in that idea of prioritizing also. It is like another layer of complexity. So
It's going to become, I mean, technically, if there's a lot of people showing up at board meetings, we have a different problem, right?
Yep.
Because it means usually if people are happy with what they're doing, they don't come. So if they're coming, they're unhappy. The way we've structured our meetings is that all public comment is forced to be up front. And so it makes it, to me, that's confusing. That's all. We decided.
I wanted to invite Patrick to weigh in with some of the background, both our recent background and some of the history that he knows of how this functions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair. I just wanted to mention, so there were a couple changes made starting in December when the board went back to in-person meetings with the public comments, how they were being addressed with in-person speakers as was done prior to the pandemic. The concern was, at that time, we were limited on the number of individuals who could be in the room based on the county standards for the in-person meeting. And I spoke with Eva, I talked to Dr. Felder, spoke with Melanie, talked to Eva in reference to allowing really both to happen. We would have a limited number of individuals who would be able to speak in person because of the space and the logistics involved with that, but also allowing the public written comments to continue. So the district, when the board went back to, again, in-person meetings, wasn't going to have a written comment. It was just going to be in person. And we felt like with the limited number of seats to allow the written comments to continue. And so that's really was just the basis of the information discussed with Eva, was just about continuing the in-person meeting, what that looked like, considering we had limited space and would have to have a process in place for people to sign up or give comments, and then have the written comments as well. The other issue that had come up previously was when the board was in hybrid meetings, having a list of people who were trying to speak through the hybrid format, having a individual showing up and having the list not matching, etc. So to simplify the process, as it was if it's an in-person meeting, in-person comments, but allowing the general comments to still continue as written comments. As far as the cutoff periods, the board getting those before the meeting, those are all local decisions. I know the history of the school district, and it used to be in the charge when individuals would come to board meetings and give public comments, that it was specifically stated the board would not act on those comments at meetings. So I think that would be a change to, and I don't know if the policy states that or if that was just in the public charge. So that may be a greater board discussion about if you're going to act on comments at meetings. Public hearings are different, and there's different formats for that. But I just wanted to specify that there wasn't all the other parameters or information being discussed here today. That was not part of the discussions with Eva. It was just about the format for the in-person individuals registering and providing in-person comments, and then the additional allowance for the written comments, since we were limiting those who could come in person.
So Patrick, I want to just comment on, there's a couple of things that are little, couple of things that I want to comment on. First of all, limited space in the meetings has always been a problem, including for when the board met in the board meeting, right? The meeting was so packed that there'd be people waiting outside to come in. If it was a hot topic like the Confederate flag, people would be waiting outside to get in, and the public was, quote, accusing the board of being disinterested in public comment because we didn't let people in the room. And so anyone that wants to speak to the board should have the opportunity to speak to the board. So I thought, and even when we were reading in schools, I thought if we were exceeding the space limit, and hopefully that will go away. I mean, the Wooded building has room for 200 people. But if we are on a space limit, don't we rotate people out? Ask people to leave and then bring the next batch in?
That is, we do, and that is part of that registration process. So we know exactly who's coming in and who's actually registered for the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we just have people show up and say, I'm next, that creates a problem for those trying to administer and create a plan on how people are coming in and getting in and out at that time. So that was part of the discussion about the registration ahead of the meeting.
Okay, so what's our cutoff? I mean, I'm used to, in the pre-COVID world, I'm used to people being able to register anytime up to the time they're going to speak. But what's our cutoff for signing up to speak? Because that should be on our site too. Was it 6
In the past,
o'clock?
it was, you had to sign up, you had to be there to sign up 15 minutes before the meeting started.
Okay, so is
That was
that,
in the like pre-COVID days when we just had a paper outside in the hallway and you had to sign up by 6:45 before a 7 o'clock meeting or something like that.
so is that still, are we not doing that anymore?
I don't think that's in policy anywhere. That's just sort of how the board handled it. So I think we've been handling it differently with this online sign up. I don't know,
Yeah,
Carrie.
and I defer to Amanda to what's on the website as far as and how that registration works.
And then
Yes,
I just want to comment on one other thing you said, that the board doesn't respond to individual comments. But if the public is commenting on something that's on our agenda, then presumably the board is considering those comments in our deliberation. Right, so I, the idea that we're not having a conversation with speakers, yes, but it's important to me. I mean, the reason people are commenting at a meeting is for the board to consider the comments in our decision making. So I, that's all. I just need to make that clarification.
Thanks, Bonnie. Okay, go ahead, Amanda.
I would just say that since we switched over to having both written and in-person comments being available for board meetings, the deadline to sign up, the forms are turned off at the start of the meeting. So they have.
I'm
up
sorry,
until
what's turned off, Amanda? I didn't hear.
the forms that collect the names of the folks who want to make in-person comment.
Okay, so they can sign up technically anytime up to the last minute. Yeah, good.
And I think in terms of the rotating people in and out, I know I've had some conversation with different people at times. I can't even remember when, but I think things have just been logistically challenging. I mean, I'm guessing, Patrick, I don't know if there's been requests for that, because even though there has been a limit, so it's like we've extended the public comment in writing because there is a limit on space at this time. But then we actually don't fill up our requests for in-person public comment. But if we were, let's say 20 people wanted to, and we could only take 10, and people are saying, hey, I really wanted to be in person, we could facilitate a rotation. But that's also complicated by the fact that we've had protesters and people acting irresponsibly. So I'm curious, Patrick, if you've seen that, like if that's something you've considered and we just haven't needed it yet, or has that seemed like really hard to do with some of the interactions we've had with people?
It's both. Again, we will set the parameters around what the board is or is not allowing for processes with public comments. If you're going to allow 200 people to show up and all 200 people to make comments, then we will put the best practices in place to manage the processes associated with that. If the public comments only allow for 20 people, 3 minutes at a time for a 60-minute comment period, then we'll set the parameters around that.
That's what our policy, that's the policy that, oh, I guess we haven't adopted it yet, but that's the way we, that's the way it's currently structured, it's 60 minutes. So, but just in the Wooded building, there's a 10-person seating limit, which is, so, and some people want to just come watch the meeting. And some of the capacity of the room is being taken by staff. So in the spirit of community engagement, we're limiting it, you know, and I think we want to embrace it. So people want to come and watch. So, and the question really is now, you know, is the meeting space going to free up as COVID dies down? Is the county going to keep us on a 10-person limit? I mean, I have been in those rooms and they're packed.
So let me just clarify, the county's not giving us a 10-person limit for the public. They've given us a 35-person limit, which includes all individuals, the board members, the staff, law enforcement, any other individuals coming for recognitions, etc. It has worked out. It's been approximately 10 people from the public once we deduct all the other individuals who are there at the meeting, or rotate people out. You know, we always come prepared with enough seat signs and enough numbers in our system and processes to accommodate more if, you know, by chance there wasn't that many staff members there that night, or we could set up more for the public. It just happens to be it's averaging about 10 people that's open for the public.
So technically,
I think we need to have kind of a full board decision, and we could do that in a board meeting. We could bring the policy, which wouldn't be the full board. So I feel like, do people feel like we should have this in a full meeting? Because I think there's both making a decision about what we're trying to implement, and there's some specific questions here, like, do we want to try to support rotating people in and out? Do we want to try to prioritize speakers such as students first, and or identifying, you know, when people come, and I feel like we'd need Eva to tell us if that's something we can do, but, you know, asking people, you know, where they're from, what's their relationship to the district. I feel like we need to come to some conclusions as a board. And then I think the other, we've had some communication gaps. The board hasn't always necessarily been tuned into what these decisions are, and we just want to make sure the rationale is clear on the website, because otherwise people think, regardless of what went into the decision, told we're cutting people off. So I just want to make sure that we have agreement on a board what we're asking staff to implement, and then once we have that agreement, that we communicate it clearly. Do you agree with that?
yeah, that's fine. I agree. I mean, I think by policy, we're saying an hour at the beginning of the meeting. So we have to accommodate that. And if it's through rotating people, or technically we could ask the staff to rotate, you know, this is a decision that staff has made, that they're going to be in the room and the public's going to have 10 people. We've got to figure out how to accommodate the public if they want to be in the room. So I don't know if that's policy or that's just practice, but
yeah. I think that's more practice. And I think a lot of this probably, if it's not in policy right now, is like board chair discretion, Carrie. But if you want like more voices from the other board members about any particular piece of how this runs, I think that's fine. You could bring it to a meeting, or you could bring like a proposal to a meeting. I also think you could just like find out what people are thinking and just make a call, you know, some of these other things about when to cut off the comments and some of this stuff.
the cutoff on comments is in policy.
The written comments, I mean.
Oh, the written, sorry.
Yeah. No, there's a couple of things we've talked about. So I think there's a variety of logistics. I think it's like just ultimately your call.
That's helpful, Sarah. And I think I might do that because the problem with bringing it to policy too is things are changing with, COVID limitations and other things. It seems like almost an unnecessary hurdle. It's really more practice than policy. So we can stay within the policy with some different practices. Okay, so I might invite other board members to comment and draft something up with guidance from Eva and Dr. Felder and Patrick, and then bring it to everybody. And I just want to mention
The only one that, the only one you might put in policy maybe is if you do decide to prioritize speakers, we could consider putting that in policy so that it's just generally, I mean, you could just put it in the notice also, but.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Tia shared with me that in Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools, written comments open until midnight of the day of the meeting, which does make sense to me because I was thinking about that. Does it get turned off at, I assume Melanie's using some automatic time off feature and she's not having to get up and turn it off herself, stay up till midnight to do it. But anyway, midnight seems to make sense. And then Tia checked with other counties and said that for signing up in person, that it's somewhere between 5 and 15 minutes before the meeting starts seems to be typical. So I think what we're doing is definitely reasonable. And then it's just the communication piece. And of course, we've had to make adjustments as we've changed locations and COVID has changed. So does that sound reasonable to you, Patrick, that we regroup and go over this and maybe?
Oh, I definitely think there needs to be discussion about what the direction of the board needs to be on public comments and practices and processes. Again, the only thing I asked was we continue the written public comments as was done previously and as was mentioned was done in Chapel Hill to allow continued written comments. All the rest of the discussion or local decisions the board can make.
Okay. Bonnie, do you have any other thoughts on this before we move on to talking about minutes on the website?
Yeah, no, so you're proposing we go till midnight on public comments, even though the meeting's over, so we're still accepting public comments. Okay.
The one reason I do like the idea of public comments extending through the meeting is people being able to submit things if they're there. Sometimes people are reacting to the meeting. If there is someone I have to cut off because they're not following the guidelines of public comment, they can send it in written form.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. And one of the things that happens is the public comments, it goes to your next topic. The public comments need to be published. The written public comments need to be published online on the website. But okay, that's fine. I get it. That's fine.
Okay, and that actually gets touched on down here. So, and some of this text I'm just deleting. Amanda, this was just what Melanie had shared with me. So this was we've actually already discussed all this. So it used to be the archive minutes haven't been kept up since like 2019. I've we've had so many changes way back then. We had superintendent changes as well as board specialist changes. I don't know if a decision was made to not keep up the archive minutes or if it just was an oversight. But so when you look at our website, it ends. I don't even know if they were kept up in 2015 and 16. That's agenda.
This is like, I think before they had Simbly too.
Okay.
I believe.
Okay, so now that makes a really big difference. Like, do we just need a statement that says archive minutes can be accessed through Simbly?
Yeah,
So,
I don't know. I didn't keep a close eye on what this practice was.
let me just need to comment. I, as a board member, have trouble working with this structure. I find it cumbersome and confusing, and if I want to find something, I can't find it. And I'm used to, if you go to Chapel Hill's website, if you go to the county's website, their meetings are they have a simple table, and you could see the agenda to the meeting, you can see the video for the meeting, you can see, I don't know if they separate the PowerPoint, and you can see the minutes. So it's all in a table. Your rows of the date, and then all the stuff. So to have this, it just would be so much easier for people to access that way. And then, and I had one other thing that's a little confusing to me, and that's the way we handle the personnel report. So the personnel report is,
Wait, let's not get, we
okay,
can do
well, I'm
that.
just thinking that needs to be
Okay.
attached back to the agenda
Right.
so that,
So I don't know if
that
Dr.
where they're,
Felder's-
where they're supposed to be, I think if you go to the list of meetings in Assembly, there's a place for minutes
Yep.
that I think gets
Oh, in Assembly.
updated afterwards, right? Like after the minutes from the previous meeting are approved.
I mean, maybe we just need clear instructions on how to get there if you're not familiar with Assembly.
yes, there is a place for minutes, you're right.
So anyway, if nothing else, we should have a statement, like as of 2019, we stopped using this as a repository because you can access them, follow these steps to get to it in Assembly or something. That's fine with me. I'm not looking for us, doing everything in triplicate. And I have to say, we had the board matters, we had the video recording, and we have the slides. But the minutes are important because people want to see, what the votes were, who voted what. And to Bonnie's point a few minutes ago, we have said that the public comments that are written will be included with the minutes. And I know we've approved those for at least, I think that came up in December. I remember we made sure to have those included with the minutes. I don't know that we've done that every month, but I want to say that with the book meeting, Melanie and I had a conversation about this. Those were not intended to be included with the minutes, and she didn't say that they would on the website. And I had asked her about that because we had students send in written public comments or written comments. I didn't know if there was any issue with, guarding their anonymity since they're minors and all of that. And she said that they weren't going to be saved with the minutes because that statement had not been made. That they weren't the same nature of public comments because we didn't have official public comments in that book meeting. They were just thoughts sent into the board.
It puts us at, we risk giving the appearance of not being transparent. So I'm just going to say that. And I think that's.
I agree with you. That's why I want to bring this here, because I want to make sure we're doing things that we agree on and we know why we're doing them.
Yeah,
Um,
I hear you
so-
on students. So that means that we need to have a statement, if you link into written public comments, that these will be displayed publicly.
Mhm.
That there's no privacy, that this is public comment, that is the nature of the beast. If you're making a public comment, it's going public. Right.
I think that is a good idea because sometimes people don't know. I also think we should have some way for students to be able to share what they want to share with the board without it being, I think some of the things students shared with us were valuable, and I can imagine why they wouldn't want to make them public comment. And so is there some other way to do that? I think might be a question for Eva.
That could be a comment in the statement that if you wish to communicate directly with the board and not publicly, then send us an email.
But then the question is, like, in terms of public records,
Well,
I guess if that was, then
I did have a conversation with Dr. Felder, and I don't think we did loop in Eva because then I had followed up with Melanie. But if those comments were to be, archived, the ones in advance of the book, we're going to look into redacting students' names since they were, minors and students.
Why would we have to do that if a student comments publicly orally, they they introduce themselves and I'm, Bonnie Hauser, Cedar Ridge High School, and here's my comment. So why would I have to redact it? If
Well, the only question would be kind of around what you said before, which is as long as people know, as long as, and in that case, we weren't archiving those comments. But if it wasn't a document where it was public comments and it was going to be included with the minutes, we need to make sure that it, that anyone who submits it, student or not, know that those are going to be, accessible to the public. And then they can decide. Yeah. So there's the communication. Yeah, there's just our decision piece, and then there's the communicating our decision. And so I will follow up on all of this with Eva and Dr. Felder and Patrick, and just make sure that we are in agreement on what we're doing and how we're communicating it. And then we'll bring it back to the board. But
so can we just summarize, because all the notes are confusing me a little bit. One is public comment. There'll be a statement on the website, so you can make public comment right until midnight. And there'll be a statement saying that public comment is public. The other
we didn't. Midnight's an idea. Is that an idea that we like, Bonnie and Sarah?
That's fine. I mean, I think the committee needs to make a decision and a recommendation to go forward to the board, right?
Okay. I didn't know if we really settled on midnight, but I'm good with midnight. How about you, Sarah?
This is not something I have a strong reaction to. I mean, this is midnight, the night of the meeting, so still receiving comments after.
Yep.
That I don't. The point that Bonnie made earlier about ending it ahead of time so that we have time to read the comments feasibly before we're making decisions. I mean, that personally made more sense to me, but I don't have a strong opinion here. So.
Okay.
Right, but Carrie, what convinced me, there's two things that convinced me. One is Carrie said sometimes people don't have time, or they get that, so it gives them a chance to finish their comments and submit them after the meeting to go public. So that's, and the other thing is, I believe that there's some benefit to citizens to have consistency across boards so if Chapel Hill Schools is doing it that way, I'm happy to do it that way.
Okay.
Sure.
Great. That's great.
So, and then the other thing, but if you're doing public comment, you could sign up to the last minute. Is that correct? Right, that's what we said. You
mean the in-person public comment?
Yeah.
Yeah, like last minute or 15 minutes, I don't know if it's 1 minute, but like 10 or 15 minutes before the meeting, pretty much.
Okay. And then
so we have a board specialist forum through NCSBA. And if you like, I can pose some of these questions to get an idea of what other counties are doing, because we have board specialists from all through North Carolina, and that's what we do. So if somebody says, well, how does your board handle public comments? Then we all chime in and say, well, this is how we do it in Orange, or this is how we do it in Chapel Hill. So to give you guys an idea of what other counties are doing, if that will be helpful to you. I mean, but that's something I can do for you.
I think that'd be great. Yeah. Patrick?
Yeah, just a comment to think about with waiting for all signups or signups that can happen up to 15 minutes prior to the meeting. When you have 100 people or more that show up at a meeting expecting to be able to make a public comment, and you're limiting it to an hour, that's 20 people. Then you have 80 angry people who are outside the meeting who came to make public comments that we're telling you can't make public comments because the sign-up roster is full. So just keep in mind that without having a way for folks to know if the comment period is closed because of the numbers your meeting will allow for, creates a situation where people drive and come all the way to a meeting and then get upset because they're not allowed to make their comments. And we can advise them and tell them, you can still submit your comments in writing, and here's the process to do that. But just understand, when people come to the meeting, they have the expectation they're going to get in and they're going to make their comments.
That's a problem with the policy. That's a problem with the policy when we're limiting public comment. And we're forcing it all at the beginning of the meeting. I mean, the reason to force it, to limit it at the beginning of the meeting is because it's not on the agenda. But if it's on the agenda, it's a problem with the policy, from my opinion. I just don't know. I advocated and I lost that. But I think if it's 20 people, it's 20 people. It's, you know, and if we have 100 people show up on a topic, then the chair is going to have to decide if they want to tell the public, we're going to schedule a public. There's so many of you who want to speak on this. We're going to schedule a public hearing. That to me is the answer on that.
Yep.
Sarah?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I personally am, that's personally more where I am too, you know, is like not limiting public comment. It is so rare that that happens, that it's even going to be more than an hour, but yeah. But I mean, I don't think that the new policy has passed its second reading yet, has it? Or did we do that in the last meeting? I can't quite remember. I don't know. We just debated this, obviously, and we're sending forward a different version. So.
Let me just clarify. The reason that public comment was limited was because people were coming to meetings and tying up the agenda with theirs, even though topics were not on the agenda. So it's like really co-opting the business of the board. I am really happy to limit public comment on topics that are not on the agenda. But then if it's on the agenda, we'd have to take the comments at the agenda item. And that's where the policy committee didn't want to do that. I think it's, you know, so that's a problem. So if it's on the agenda, then I think there should be no limit to the amount of comments that people have. And if we're getting 100 people signing up on a topic that's on the agenda, we really messed up, because we assumed something was ready to go and the public is pretty unhinged by it.
Okay.
I don't know what to
Okay.
do with that.
With the minutes, the idea of the minutes being posted online versus staying in Assembly, do we have a consensus about what we're asking? Are we asking Tia to resume putting them all in this other location, or do we have consensus around explaining to people how to access them via Assembly?
I mean,
Well,
I think those old archive pages should just say clear. I thought that they did, that they're some sort of archive, and
It
where the
says
right place
archive,
is.
but it doesn't really explain why there aren't, like, when I look at, I didn't realize it was because Assembly. Like, it just didn't occur to me that that's
So
why
I mean, we
we
should
stopped.
just update that, and then we need to make sure that all the minutes are in Assembly where they belong.
Okay.
Well, and the board, so I'll tell you where that's not where it gets confusing to me. I'm trying to find it. Let's see, it's in the archive materials. So you have the archived items. Where's the part? So, boy, it's sending me right into Assembly. What about if I want to go and see the board video from you know, September 15th, making up a date? Where do I go?
Those
Yeah, I
just
think it
sort
would
of
be
go
helpful to-
Can I
backward.
chime in? I would say
Yes,
that
ma'am.
as far as that particular question about accessing videos of board meetings, they're all posted on YouTube, and I usually keep a month's worth of board recaps on the board page so it doesn't get too cluttered. And they go below the board meeting announcements.
I have a thought about a couple of these items. Because I was just thinking about some board update from like some while back, and I was like, oh, I wonder where these go after that time period. So I think those are a really helpful thing to store somewhere on that website. Maybe it's like a different, sidebar page. But the video and then the presentation slides from the actual meeting, are we putting links to those in the minutes? Because I think that would be a great way. You have the written minutes, but then you could have the link to the video and the actual slide deck in the minutes.
I think that works if the minutes get posted right away. We're not so good at that. And so first of all, if I want to look at the September 15th meeting, I want the video and the presentation and the minutes all in one place. I don't want to have, right now I have to go to 4 places. And I have to know that that all this stuff is embedded in the minutes. Then there's the personnel report. So why can't I have a table that says September 15th meeting, here's the agenda, here's the slide deck, here's the video, and the agenda would include the personnel report. Why wouldn't I go to that in one place? Why? And
Okay, can I follow up on this too and bring this back?
Yeah.
Bonnie, you okay with that?
yeah, and oh, I'm sorry,
Right.
one other thing that has to be there is a public comment. Needs to be there too.
Mhm.
And if I
Mhm.
go onto the Chapel Hill Schools website, it's all right there. I don't have to dig around and figure out where everything is. I just go to the table. If I want to see the public comment for the meeting, I can see it. If I want to see the video for the meeting, it's right there. And they're using Granicus, which takes the meeting video and breaks it up by agenda item. And I don't know why we're not doing that. Is there a reason we're not doing that? We're not using Granicus?
I have no
That's a
idea.
question for Amanda or Patrick.
No idea. I mean, lots of districts use Simply, obviously, but I have no idea why we're using one over another.
And actually, Chapel Hill Carborough is looking at switching to Assembly as well.
Really, why is that?
I think they like the platform itself for Assembly.
So will they move their videos to Simply? I mean, are they going to unstructure it?
I'm
Have you all
not sure
seen-
that. I'm not
Yeah.
sure of that, but I know that they're looking into Assembly.
Okay, so it would be worth it to go on, if you haven't seen it, it's worth it to go on their videos, because what you'll see is it has the agenda right there. And if you're interested in item 6 on the agenda, you click on it and it takes you right to item 6 in the video.
Yeah, that
Whereas
part's
we
really
have-
helpful. Mhm.
Where we have to sit there and scroll through and figure it out. And now that we're paying the consultants to do the.
I was gonna say, but I feel like that's maybe a technology thing.
Well, we're paying now to have all those consultants at the Whitted building, and I thought that's one of the things they do. Maybe I'm wrong, but
No, we're not paying for Granicus for the technology folks. We're paying for them to stream our videos and to use the technology that's located in that facility, but we're not paying for a Granicus license and for them to splice videos to the Granicus agenda.
so how much would that cost more? And if yes, how much more?
I have no idea. We haven't discussed about changing our technology platform for board meetings. I'm happy to explore and get back to the board if that's a directive.
It's not our technology platform. I think it's the videos exclusively. It's moving from YouTube to Granicus.
Okay.
We do not have Granicus nor a Granicus license. So we would
Understand.
need to move to that platform.
Okay, so the question becomes how much, how hard would that be? Because it's better. It's substantially better. And
I am curious then why Chapel Hill is thinking about moving away from it to,
well, we don't know that they are. We know they're thinking about moving to Sibley. We don't know what
Right.
they're planning to move off Granicus.
I think. Okay.
We have to
Okay,
find out.
I would
Yeah.
like us, I'd like us to move on and table some of these ideas, but honestly, there were a lot of good conversation and points were raised, and I will follow up. So if you have other thoughts that you want to,
I just want to close on, it's
Fine.
really important to me to have a simple table where someone can see all the material that goes to a board meeting.
I got that. I mean, that is a good point. I appreciate that point.
Okay, that's it.
Okay, I would like to pass to Dr. Keeling, who's going to start us off before we kind of change gears and start looking back at resolutions and forums we've had and conversations that come out of those, because they're related to our community engagement.
Good morning, everyone. So I was
Morning.
debate if, since it's a small group of us, if we should do this full group or if people should do it on their own. I'm gonna try to figure out how to share my screen. No, I know how to share, but I can never find what I am trying to share. That's the hard part. Okay. Screen 3. Share. Uh-oh. What do you see anything? Am I sharing anything?
Yeah, I see it. What is needed? The what is needed slide. Mhm.
Okay, so this morning I was thinking about what we're going to talk about today, kind of recapping the last community engagement meeting, the meeting with the students, and the resolution that came out of the situation that happened. So I wanted to start with us taking a moment to reflect on this question first. What is needed in order to have a community, district, school, classrooms where everyone can show up in their identity and feel safe, welcome, and like they belong? So I'll give everyone like a minute to kind of think about what that is, and we'll full group do it since it's a small group of us. What is needed in order to create an environment where students, families can show up as their identity and feel safe, welcome, and like they belong? Everyone have some thoughts? Okay, so let's start there as a full group. What are some thoughts about what is needed?
Do people just shout things out, Dr. Keeling?
Yeah, sure.
So the first thing I thought was trust. And then I thought, well, how do you get trust? And I think that's through relationships. So I think, I think people need relationship with each other.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Smiley.
I guess I was thinking about the classroom, and this is just sort of, one layer, because this is beyond the classroom. But within the classroom, the difference it makes when the teacher I was thinking about Mr. Gaddy actually, and just when the teacher just makes it really clear that I'm about welcoming all of you, you know, in your identity or identities. And it's like, it makes such a difference when the leader sets the stage that way. And, you know, in terms of trust, like maybe you only feel that trust in that classroom, and you have this sense that when you leave, it's not still there. And that's sad. But, you know that when I'm in this classroom, I get to be my whole self. And like, you know, with some people, some teachers can just make it really clear that they're not going to tolerate anybody not treating everyone that way. So you're not just getting it from the teacher, what they put out there, but you know that teacher is like protecting that value in the whole space.
I'm going to apologize because I have a couple of dogs that are barking a lot, and it's hard for me to hear this conversation, and it's important. I think there, you know, just want to throw out there that there's a lot of reasons for people to not engage. And sometimes they're not ready. And they might not have anything to say, or they might not, do you know what I mean? So there's lots of reasons, and I just don't want to overlook that, or some folks, and this is, was personal for me, but sometimes people are terrified of engaging, you know, and it's not necessarily, it's just personal, you know, and so how do we, and, you know, Sarah, you made the comment about relationships, you know, how do people have relationships with the others so that they're willing to take risks. Yeah, so anyway.
Any other thoughts of what needs to happen so everyone feels in their identity that they are safe, welcome, and like they belong?
What kind of, building on both Bonnie's and Sarah's points, like the trust and the like the fear, that not feeling safe. I mean, it needs to be sustained.
There's, yeah, and one other thing, and that's there's a sense that they have to, you know, you have to feel like you matter. Your participation matters.
One more
Great.
thing to add on to that is, I'm thinking about the like belong piece, and I think sometimes something you need to feel a sense of belonging is not being the only, you know, like knowing peers who share some identity with you and not feeling like the only one. So I think that makes it more challenging to feel that sense of belonging. I'm thinking this is actually a little bit more on the lines of like staff members, right? And being like the only Latinx staff member in a building, or the only Black staff member in a building, or something like that. And you might feel welcome, right? And you might feel safe, but that sense of, and you can feel a sense of belonging, but also there's something about not feeling isolated that I think kind of goes with it too.
Yeah. Good. Great thoughts. Any others?
I just want, you know, when we did the support groups, there was a real difference in participation amongst the students, right? And I can't tell if it was the, you know, I don't know these students. I don't know if it was their individual preference, style, you know, because the other thing is, not everybody communicates comfortably in the same way. You know, some people prefer to communicate in groups, some people prefer to communicate one-on-one. it's better educationally if we get people comfortable in more venues, you know, so are we doing that? Are we sensitive to, some people like email and some people like text, you know, and some people like the telephone.
Yeah, with the student forums, yeah, and the group dynamics of some people sharing more than others. But one of the comments in a couple of the forums, I think more than one Latinx student, and just to Sarah's point about not being the only in that sense of belonging, one of the students said, like, I'm not culturally represented in my classes. And when they do touch on things that are related to my, you know, history, where, you know, family members who have immigrated, it was done so like in an insulting manner. So I'm just thinking about the responsibility. There's so many things we have to do right, you know? But so the importance of having our leaders culturally proficient. And then another thing a student said, and we're not going to hash out, I promised to Dr. Felder, we're not going to hash out all the student data because she's really wanting to do it in a full picture, but with other data. But like the best to me, and I'm seeing this in younger generations, and I feel like I'm there myself, but like, it's exciting, like enjoying people's different identities, you know, seeing that as a plus, seeing that as a win, seeing that as, you know, respectful curiosity, or like valuing the different identities that people bring. I think that's when we've really done this well, is when that is more present than not. And one of the students mentioned that they're like, I want to learn about more people's background, you know. I don't even just want my own background reflected. I want to hear everybody's stories. So that maybe is when, like, an indicator of when there's a really strong sense of inclusion.
Good.
Yeah, that's a great point, Carrie. That's really important to me. It's the tapestry, right? The tapestry is more beautiful than an individual color, to me.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? This is really good. So I'm going to see if I captured what was said, some of the things that are needed in order to create this environment where people can show up in their identity and feel safe, welcome, and like they belong. There needs to be trust, and you get there through relationship. It needs to be clearly communicated that you are welcome, and that has to extend across the board. It can't just be captured in isolated pockets. You have to respect people where they are. You can't try to make them what you want them to be. You have to respect where they are. You have to create an environment where people feel like they can take a risk, where they can step out of whatever it is they brought to the table, that they can take that risk to kind of move through that and move maybe even beyond their discomforts and on to that next level of getting to know people. It has to be sustained. It has to be part of the culture, that it doesn't matter if we switch up board, superintendent, principal, like people will come and go, but it is just part of who Orange County Schools and this community is. People have to feel like they matter in order for it to be safe and welcoming, that we need to hear you. You need to be part of this. You have to feel and see that you are not the only one. You're not the only one that identifies in that way. You have other people that look like you, share culture, language. One of the things that needs to be done is that there needs to be the ability to communicate in a variety of ways. It can't just be like, oh, this is what works for us, so this is how we're going to communicate, right?
It has to be a number of different ways that people can engage. What needs to be done is that microaggressions need to be addressed, like micro insults need to be addressed. And what kind of goes with that is people need to be culturally proficient. And being culturally proficient means that I know how to communicate with people of other cultures. I know how to interact with people of other cultures. And then the last thing I have is that it is seeing diversity as our strength. It is what makes us, like, it is the fabric of who we are. Maybe when Ms. Hauser was thinking of a quilt and all of the different patches that go together that make the quilt so beautiful. So let me see if this moves to the next one. Did that go to the next slide, or is it still the same slide?
It moved.
Okay. So now I want us to think about all of those things that we just said, and I want us to consider, did we, in those comments that we just went through and summarized, did we address the historical foundations of why people feel unsafe, unwelcome, and like they belong? Did we include the voices of those who have been pushed to the margins, or those who don't feel like they belong? Did we include that as part of a necessary component of what we need to do? And did we include things that we need to do differently, and not just things that people, like those who may have been pushed out, need to do differently? So I'm going to give you a second to reflect. I think that we did in some of these, but I want you to reflect on that and see, are there other things that need to be added if perhaps we did not hit on some of those? So I'm going to give you a minute to think about that, and then we'll discuss. Okay. Full group, just like we did before. Thinking about these, did we miss anything?
And it's always a bad idea to give me the answer key. So this changes everything for me. So I'll tell you, there's a couple of things that, and I was thinking a little bit about the support groups, because if you remember, they said, one of the things they complained a lot about was plus lunch, and they said, we don't have the time to build the relationships to feel safe, right? That was a big deal. I don't know about the historical stuff. That's the other thing is tolerance. And if you're with your own, it's tolerance and presumption. I think they go together. But if you're hanging out with people that all agree with you, you can finish each other's sentences, and who's going to go and who's not going to go and what, But if you're with a diverse group, it really changes. And there's going to be, you move into, Jackie Shelton Green calls it cultural collision, where we begin to say things that have different, Whoopi Goldberg just did it, right? In a big way. And, but we say things from our cultural perspective, but it means something different in another cultural perspective. So rather than yell and scream, you're a bigot, or you're a racist, or you're whatever, to say, what did you mean by that? I do it, my favorite is the word articulate, which has so really different cultural meanings. So how do we, and then there's the people we're not hearing from at all, that rather than presume we know what we believe, how do we ask? So with that, I'll shut up and ask.
One thing I thought when I looked at these is, the voices of those who have been pushed to the margins, right? And I was like, well, we had these student forums, and we heard from students about some of their experiences where they felt like a teacher made them feel like they didn't belong, or a teacher did. And, so we did. But something that I forgot that I had been thinking as I was sitting in the student forums, in some of them, was, oh, these are students who are like really involved with a lot of things, right? Oh, these students are in the like, let's connect students at this school club. Like, who's not in this meeting right now are the disconnected students. And I sort of, I like noticed that. And then still in this conversation, I was like, oh, we heard from students, So just to reflection on that.
Yeah, I think I agree with what you both have said. In terms of the historical foundations, I do think that ties in things like, racial history, historical foundations in our school or district, or things that happened in the classroom last month, that were never addressed or something, like we have to address things that have happened from like the recent past and the distant past. And then I was thinking about how, like, when you do those, or when I like being okay with, like basically okay with criticism, or like sitting with something, hearing someone's frustrations with, the group, whatever the group is, whether it's your classroom or your district, and just sitting with those, listening to that frustration or that criticism, and then getting to that place, okay, what do we need to do differently, rather than getting defensive. And for myself, that's gotten easier for me over some years, like recent years, as we kind of practice this stuff, you get used to realizing we haven't done this well. We haven't been able to hear some of those stories or hear some of those complaints or frustrations. And so I think it's something we have to practice.
Mhm. Any other thoughts? You have
When I think of historical foundations, I think there's a question about what you were told growing up. So there's historical foundations. I think Lily Tomlin used to have a routine that said things my mother told me that weren't true, and so there's that.
Mhm.
And in the context of this, I have a question for Carrie. What is the cultural issue around what's good for the goose and is good for the gander?
Yeah, I was kind of wrong about that. That was more equality than equity. It was actually more like, if it's good for the man, it's good for the woman. It's actually more of a gender equality.
Right, but is that, so you're saying it is everything as opposed to it's not everything. Gender equity is a big deal. Cultural relevance for gender. I was going to give Dina, I have an old, if you have a VCR, I have this wonderful video of about cultural differences between men and women and how it affects the way they operate on teams. And it's really interesting because it talks about, for example, women have meetings in the meeting, men never have meetings in the meeting. Men have meetings on the golf course, and so they show up at the meeting, they want to make all the decisions and move on, whereas women have very long agendas and they want to talk about everything. But it's just something that it's kind of like there are untold rules about the way certain things go. And if you're not part of the culture that set those rules, then you're marginalized from the get-go. And that's a way women have been kept out of the business world for a long time. Once I understood, just tell me the rules of the game, I'll play it. I don't care what the game is, just tell me the rules. It's like, get a good job. I'm sorry, get a good education, get a job. We forgot to tell people that you better have some insiders that can get you the internships and that can get you the job opportunities and stuff like that. It's those are the more subtle aspects of privilege that are not in the rule book. Anyway, I'll just shut up now.
No, that's all relevant. Any other thoughts?
We haven't talked about the last bullet on this page, the like, what do we need to do differently? Just naming that. I think like the way I was thinking about the question, this is not, yeah, but there's always the need to hold up a mirror to ourselves.
Good. So some of the things that I heard this time around is getting at exactly what I was trying to get us to get to. Some of it is about the structure of the schooling, right? And of how we do things in Orange County schools. So a comment was made that we don't have time to build relationships because a schedule, a daily schedule was made without the thought of, is there time for relationship building within this daily schedule? So what was kind of prioritized as we build our master schedules, right? The ability to collide with those who are different versus environments where people can just stay with people that are like them, right? So again, that speaks to the structure of how we have everything that we do, right? Not just within a classroom or within a school, but even like within the community. And you all started tapping on that kind of around your board meetings and how you have those set up. And I'm gonna leave that up there. I was gonna escape. I'll leave it up there till we go through these. The ability to move past assumptions. So here again, like I think you're able to move past your assumptions when you have the ability to collide with people who are different, because they will begin to help you to challenge the things that you thought about whatever the situation is. So have we created an environment where challenging and being critically analyzing the way that we do things, where that is acceptable, and not just acceptable, it is welcome and encouraged? Or have we created an environment where if it ain't really what I want to do, I'm not good with it, so we're not going to do it, right? And what are the ways that that plays out? So to Ms. Smiley's point around what do we need to do differently, everyone in here sits in a place of power and privilege. So have we created an environment that sustains our power and privilege? Or have we created an environment where it is like, help me to think about this differently, right? And that's a very hard place to be in. People often want to get to power so they can keep power, right? I heard that, yes, we had meetings with students, but the realization that perhaps these are students who are already engaged. And that was a really good point, because that is something that I noticed, that in the different student groups that I was in, it's always the same students that are being sent, and that we don't hear from the student who's like, I'm not going to go to these classes because there's nothing in here for me. And so how do we begin to engage the voice of those who really are disengaged, right? I heard the racial history and that context, and have we addressed those in what the things that we need to do in order for people to feel safe and welcome? Have we really dug into those historical roots and foundations? And to that, I heard the history we know is just the history we were told. And whose perspective and point of view did that come from? And I think, again, that also goes with the more that we have the opportunity to collide with those that are different. I love that saying. That's why I'm going to keep saying that. The ability to collide and to come together, it also helps us to begin to see, wow, like, no, I didn't know that. That wasn't the history that I was taught, right? And then this is also a good one, the untold rules, because that so much speaks to, here again, the culture. And if we're trying to create this culture where welcoming, belonging, safe, that is sustained, it requires us to look at the untold rules. And we often don't do that. We often, when we think of what are we going to do to address this issue, we don't ever necessarily touch those untold rules, because often those are the things that where we feel safe, right? It's where we feel comfort, to Ms. Doyle's point around sitting in the criticism, sitting in the discomfort, right? So now I am going to hit the escape so that I can see everyone, if I can figure out how to unshare. Don't know how to do that.
Top right, top right.
Top right. So the only thing I see is everyone's face. I don't even see buttons. So I wonder if Joe can like stop me from sharing. Somebody stop me. I don't know how to do it.
If you go way up to the top, so that like little, if you push your mouse way up to the top, it should drop down options, and on the right, I think, is where it says stop sharing.
Thank you. Whoever kicked me out. Thank you. I didn't even have a top bar. All I had was this. So, Zoom. It completely takes away from my flow. So anyway, what I am trying to get at today, as we dig into the resolution, some of the comments from students, replaying what was said at the last meeting, and some of history rose up out of that, some of ways to help people to feel like they are safe and they belong. Today, I want to raise up the word Shema, and it's a Jewish word. And I want to also apologize because it is a word that is way deeper than how I am about to pull from it. So it is in no way to disrespect the full meaning of the word, but it means to hear and to heed. So it is to really listen to what is being said, and to really, I think like the essence of the word is obedience, really. It's really to take that and to really move from that place, and to understand that, like I think of, I must decrease such that you increase. And so I just wanted to do this kind of reflection for us, to get us to move past what may be very good solutions, but maybe technical surface solutions, and to get us to begin to dig deeper, to really heed, to really hear, and to really heed, and to look at those underlying historical, who are we really listening to? How do I move from my positions of power and privilege? How do I use my power and privilege? One of the concepts that I'm like started to work with staff on is, how do I put my privilege and power on the line so that those who don't have it start to get some of that, right? So that's all I wanted to bring to the table today as you all begin to dig into this second part of the meeting. Do you all have any thoughts, final thoughts, comments?
Okay, you know I'm going to ask, how do you spell Shema?
Shema. And then Ms. Hauser, listen, if there's anything that I have said out of line, let me know. Is there something in there? You're muted.
It's Hebrew, so you would need Hebrew letters, but yeah, it's a hear and heed. I think there is something about listening. I'm going to challenge us in a really different way. This is really strange, I know. Imagine if you had a political point of view that didn't agree with the board's. Let's say and I think a great recent one is, you thought the books were pornographic, right? Or you are, there is definitely, and it's not us, but there's definitely a sense, and it comes up if we want to talk about the hate. If you remember when we put out the do no harm resolution, that there's a concern that if you are not in favor of over masking or vaccinating, that you must be a member of a hate group. That we can tend to do that. And I just want to challenge us to, I call it political bigotry, You know, because it's a different kind of bigotry. If you don't share our values, is it because you're a bigot? It's because you have different values? I mean, I talk to parents who really are uncomfortable with vaccines when they're kids. I think it's their right, you know, but if you ask, so I think there's a question about our own, so that's just a place as a board member. I think it's really different for teachers and kids and stuff like that, but we have a responsibility as a board to hear people that we don't agree with without labeling them. I think I'm just throwing it out there.
Thanks, Bonnie. Okay, I'm going to keep us moving ahead with this Google Doc because I put in here the resolutions that, so we're first look at the Indigenous Peoples Day one and then the racial harm one. And because after all the whereas statements, we get to resolves, right? And I want to make sure that we're talking about circling back to our resolves. And I talked about this with Dr. Felder in advance of the meeting. I know she got called away. So some of the questions that I want to have come up in here are like, you know, who's the staff contact on this? What's the timeline? In what way and when would we like an update? And just so that we're not losing track of these. Okay, so our first resolve with the Indigenous Peoples Day one has to do with valuing contributions from our Indigenous community and continuing to seek relationships with guidance. And I know offhand of some different ways we're continuing that, but to keep going here, continuing to implement teacher training, particularly PD 8048, so that our classroom materials are culturally relevant, our celebration of holidays are culturally respectful, and our Indigenous students can experience the equitable school climate they deserve. Dr. Keeling, do you know where we are with some of that? I know there's a tension with PD because we've needed so much PD on so many different topics. We've sometimes used up all our time for staff or staff have been exhausted. So just, can you give us an update on where we are with that?
So we shared with all teachers through the CNI department the information on the Indian education professional development materials. I think what I can do is have them double back to see how many staff members actually utilized it. And in terms of our culturally relevant classroom materials and just teaching to be more culturally relevant, a lot of that work right now is being done through the equity leads. And to your point, the CNI department has had a lot of curriculum to train people on. So I think that they may be at a point where they're starting to work on it. I think it's just like in some pockets. I know that the math leads are working on it, and I know that the literacy leads are working on it with their coaches. Celebration of holidays at a leadership meeting. There was a professional development around holidays. And our just conspiracy. I don't think that we have like zeroed in on certain like different student groups and what their experience is like and how do we adjust for their experience. I think that's a point that we need to get to.
Okay, so is that something, do you want me to circle in terms of a timeline? So one thing I'm thinking is like, do you want to share with me an update and I can send it out? Should we have some like updates around some of these things in the board weekly update? Like what makes sense for a way to circle back and communicate?
So one of the things that we have talked about starting to do in our cabinet meetings, as the same with the strategic plan where we go through the action steps, is going through the action steps of the equity plan, because these are spelled out in the equity plan. And so what I can say to cabinet is each week, as we are going through each of the different goals, if you would like for them to put an update in their weekly update around the goals, then I can have them do that, unless there's some other way that the board prefers to have the updates delivered.
I think that makes sense. If that's what works for cabinet to do, then let's do what works.
I want to raise a concern I have that we have courses that we're unable to give because of a teaching shortage. We have, and Dina mentioned that, there is massive amount of work that's going on around literacy and curriculum that in general, so, and there's the native, but there's so many aspects of our curriculum that need to be made culturally relevant. So do you know what I mean? I don't want to separate out one group, because then, I want to, there's other groups that need attention as well. So how do we look at this in terms, I would really am kind of interested. I think we all learn when we talk about some culturally relevant updates that are made to curriculum. And I love when Dina presents that to the board at board meetings. But is that something that, to me, it's more interesting than talking about equity goals, if you will. It's really interesting to see very specifically things that we're doing. So I just wonder if we can, I don't want to take a lot of, this should be a mainstream thing. It is a mainstream thing through your equity lead. So how do we just get a progress report on what you're doing rather than make this something different?
I think one possibility for that is to bring that to Student Achievement Committee and talk about the efforts to bring more cultural relevance and responsiveness. Or it could be like a whole board thing. But that's one place, if we thought we wanted more time with it, we could look at a future student committee meeting agenda.
Yeah, I don't want more time. I want to hear it, and I want the public to hear it. So that's why I wanted it at a board meeting.
I agree with you on that, Bonnie. We'll do that as well.
And then I have a very specific question. I was going to call Tony Hayes myself and ask him what to do on a personal note. But there's a question about Thanksgiving. I have a really big question about Thanksgiving because it's an important holiday. It's an important American holiday. And to some people, it means something different. And so I don't think we're going to undo the holiday, but I was wondering if there's something we could add to the holiday that is respectful to our Native communities. Just something, a little gesture, in the Jewish faith, we started adding oranges to Seder plate to recognize the prospect of female rabbis. It's a silly little thing, but I just wonder if there's a practice that people could add to their Thanksgiving that would be respectful.
Okay.
I think it's hard because I think Native Americans don't celebrate Thanksgiving. Not that they may not come together and eat, I don't know, but I think large scale, it doesn't have the same connotation for them. It's not something that was a great day. So I don't know that there's something that can be added that would suddenly make it okay.
I'm going to
but that's
ask them
something that we can talk to the Ms. Jeffries and other members of the tribal leadership to get their take on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to call Tony. My different reason to call him, so I really want them to offer a suggestion. And if we're going to make this is cultural collision in action, right? And if we're going to make it work, we've got to find the win-win. We've got to find a way to be respectful and not say we're going to live in something that happened 400 years ago. So, but we're going to acknowledge, because the holidays life has evolved since then for whatever reasons. So how do we do something how do we figure out a way move forward together.
Okay. I'm going to keep pressing because I have a feeling we might not get through everything today. But okay, so I know there's that this is being pursued. The honors level course is being pursued for next year, but that depends on, you know, hiring, and I don't know what more we should say about it publicly at this point, but I've asked about this with Dr. Felder a number of times, and I know that this is being pursued.
Well, I have two questions about it. One is, are
Mhm.
students interested in this? And then, do we know, or is this something that the board has asked for? And are the students interested in it? And the second question is the course available through the North Carolina Virtual Public School? Because they do have a cultural cafe series, and I just don't know, which I think is just really one-off classes, but is there a way to bring it forward? Is there a way to bring it forward that can get it done, as opposed to leaving, that can get something done or something moving?
So one of the things that I have as an action step for this is that before you offer the course, that the high schools do tend to send out a survey to students to gauge their interest. So right now, I think the high schools are starting to prepare for next year. So this would be that time frame of sending out that interest to gauge how many students would like to take this course. Yes.
And then also checking with the virtual public school. All right, or maybe Tony, maybe the Okanichi, when you talk to the Okanichi, they may have a suggestion on a class that might be available online. You know.
Something that came up. So when Kara Stewart presented to us last June, talking about accurate data, it was June. And I remember following up from that meeting and pursuing how we're doing this. And some of the feedback I got is we were almost too late in the cycle to change any processes for the 21-22 school year. And so I wanted to make sure we got back to this question early in terms of identifying students. And we know there's a history of students maybe not identifying as Native who have Native history. But Dr. Keelan, can you speak to this question?
Sure. And I don't know if Mr. Ablate and student like Power School has looked at this, but I spoke with Joy Tolan, who was over Power School, and apparently there was a process that I don't think it was Orange County Schools. I think the state said that this is how it can happen, that if parents don't pick a race or an ethnicity, that the Power School manager can select, right? And so when we had this conversation, my thing was, well, that can't happen. It cannot be that someone is looking at someone and they shouldn't even have to be put in that situation where they're trying to figure out, oh, well, let me pick something for you. So what we did say is, one, that's really moving away. We don't really have that practice anymore. We're now utilizing like social workers, counselors to touch base with parents to say, like, how would you like to identify? And so that's where we are. So Joy has said, or Ms. Tolan has said, that she feels like at this point we do have an accurate representation because that subjectivity has been removed and conversations are being had with parents.
You always run into the question about mixed race, right? That how many people are because there's been a lot of intermarriage, particularly with Native, but with everybody is the truth of it. I don't want to prejudge or presume, but
okay, so then the in terms of Indigenous Peoples Day, as we continue to we'll continue to recognize this, obviously that's already done. But I think to your point about holidays, Bonnie, and Thanksgiving in particular, and I did notice last year, I felt really bad celebrating Thanksgiving. I really actually stopped wishing people happy Thanksgiving because it's really more like a day of remembrance, you know, for Native people. But then found out one of my Native friends does celebrate Thanksgiving. So I don't know the answer to that question, but I feel like as we continue to collaborate in the fall in particular, I know we're collaborating year round, but particularly around Indigenous Peoples Day, I believe, Dr. Keeling, we've had some of those conversations about appropriate honoring of culture and holidays. So I don't know if that's something we're taking a break from right now and we'll pick it back up in the fall. I don't know if that's accurate at all, but.
So we are, and the other thing that we're going to do is publish a calendar of all of the different cultural holidays, so that it's not just an academic calendar or an athletic calendar, but it'll also be a calendar of the different holidays. And our biggest fear is we don't want to miss something. And then someone say, oh, you celebrated this, but you didn't celebrate this. So that's what we're working on right now.
Yeah, I think that would be really, really helpful to have some culturally appropriate holidays. I think that would be helpful. I'll just share as someone who grew up and, you know, Christmas is not my holiday, Easter is not my holiday, and sometimes you get along to get along, or however the saying goes. And you accept that it is the mainstream holiday and it's not yours. And sometimes then all of a sudden you get invited to Christmas celebration with a Christian family and you go, wow, this is really cool. Or you invite someone who's not Jewish to a Seder and they go, this is really cool. I mean, that's the end game. You know, we're not trying to, you know, Thanksgiving has this discomfort, but I think Thanksgiving is a really important holiday for lots of families. And so that's one that really just sits with me. And I don't want to give I'd be uncomfortable giving the appearance, and I'm not interested in devaluing it. I just would like to add a practice to it, or offer the opportunity to add a practice to it that's respectful of our Indigenous communities.
Yeah, that's a good point, Bonnie. I enjoyed going to a Seder at my friend's house.
See?
I've gotten to go to the temple with people. Okay, this specific one, where are we at with recognizing the tribal heritage of the land where River Park Elementary School was established? I feel like I heard about this like months ago, and I can't recall the last time I've had a conversation about this.
I thought we destroyed that when we tried to rename the school.
Here's Dr. Felder. I think she's joining to speak to this point.
Yes, and I'm so sorry that I haven't been able to fully participate in the meeting thus far. And so I will need to get back to the board with regards to this item. I don't want to speak out of turn. I do think that some efforts have been made towards this, and all of the resolutions. As you know, there are a number of items in each. And so would like to have time to consult with staff to see where we are with regards to each and get back to the board accordingly. I think the one that we've made the most headway in, and I'm not sure if it's one that's going to be discussed today, would be the equity resolution. And
do you mean from this particular resolution, or do you mean
Well, you're in the resolution regarding Native.
We're in the
people,
indigenous peoples, yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, when I think about all of the resolutions, as we have a number of them,
Mhm.
when I think about all of them, and I'm thinking from top of my head, the one that I think we've made the most progress on with regards to addressing each of the resolutions would be the equity resolution.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if that one's being discussed today. So I'm just asking for time to consult with staff
Sure.
and come back and provide update to the board with regards to all of the resolutions and where we are with each. That's all.
Yeah, I think that's great, Dr. Felder, and I totally expected that we'd be circling back on a number of these. That's not a problem at all. And we might need to bring the equity resolution. Maybe we can even use that as some of our opening next time, Dr. Keeling. Since I didn't add that in here, I apologize for that. So going on to the one addressing harm caused to students by incidents of hostile and racist behavior. So we have this to talk about. We have the November 5th community engagement to talk about, which was largely in response to this. And then we may not get much to the student forums today, which is okay, because I know there's more conversation and like analysis of comments that we want to have with that. But so, okay, our resolves are standing united against all forms of white nationalism, white supremacy, recognizing the phrase Black Lives Matter as an affirmation of the inherent value of lives of our Black students, staff, and community. And again, and I mentioned this to Dr. Felder, this is just a method of checking in on where we are. I don't think we're expecting these things to be done, but I read these, I'm like, what is ours as a board to do? Whose is what to do here? So I remember last fall we had conversation around action and communication plans because we weren't sure if we were going to have more incidents. Where are we with that? It also says including a text alert system as requested by students.
Yes, so that would be one I'd have to get back to the board with regards to an update.
Okay.
And that would be the work of the district. Actually, I think all of these are, in my opinion, but
just to be clear, we have the Say Something, See Something app,
we do.
right? And I thought that Pat's team is on alert. They're on a direct link with the sheriff's department, right? So they get alerted if there's known activity in the community, right? I mean, this is what I had understood to be the case. I think the sheriff's department is doing, and I would like to hear more, would be interested in hearing more about it. But I thought the sheriff's department is doing, and the state are doing surveillance on threats on, and it could be hate groups, but it also could be, guns and other kind of safety issues that are, and I'll just add one other thing, and I want to hear from Patrick, is if we're in hate groups, it means our bullying policy is not working. Because bullying is the beginning, is the beginning of progression to hate, right? And if we're allowing bullying, then, right, does that make sense? Am I speaking Greek?
I hear what you're saying, Bonnie. Go ahead, Patrick.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify what alerts we get and do not get. Life safety alerts dealing with students connected to the schools, we will receive those 24/7. Other alerts that are not life safety that have a connection to the schools, we receive those. The life safety alerts that are school connected are also shared with law enforcement from the Safe School Center. Things that happen in the community that individuals send tips in on, we may or may not get those if it's not school related. So if there's something happening like last night, that my phone and people were asking me what was going on at Walmart, there were police cars, there was something going on in the community. Somebody might have sent a tip in on that. We're not going to, that's not a school related matter. Law enforcement's not going to call us and we're not going to find out about that. So I'm not sure what the expectation is for us having an app of what's happening in the community. I'm missing that part of what, of that conversation as to the community. The app is available for the community to use, but we may not necessarily get those or be able to respond to those as a school employee.
Thank you for that, Patrick. If I'm interpreting this correctly, it is for the district to alert via text families and students with regards to any, hate groups that may, or hate groups that may be in our communities, say, much like occurred in the fall at the athletic event. But they want to hear that from the district. If we know that that's happening, I'm reading this as, interpreting this as we are sending out a text message, some kind of alert.
Yeah, I think you're right, Dr. Felder, and I had to sit with us a minute to recall that too. The Say Something app is people sending in their concerns
Exactly.
and then sending something out. And if I remember correctly, part of this about the text alert system, for example, is, well, this isn't exactly a text alert, but like, for example, for Orange High School families, there's an Orange High School app that at one point wasn't kept up. Now it's maybe kept up more, but so it's sort of like, what do we already have and what are we keeping up? And so I think there's some maybe questions around that. So is this something we should follow up with too?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I was actually thinking the reverse also, that if there's a threat in the community, and I don't want to be sending them out to families because I don't think we should be kind of a constant, trigger of we live in you should be worried. But I think if I'd like the schools to be aware if there's a concern in the community. And I know the resource officers do that regularly. So if there's criminal activity, if there's, the resource officers are notified. Maybe that's enough. I don't know. But so that's active, but I don't know if the sheriff is getting surveillance, it says we're worried about human trafficking, or we're worried about other things. We're worried about things that are threats that are happening in the community that could show up in school.
So, yeah, it helped me to better understand. I'm thinking Orange County Schools community, as in our school campuses, offices, that regard, because there's a lot that goes on in the community. I don't want the district to be in the position of having to communicate when someone is standing with a Confederate flag down on, downtown. That's not our job. But if you are on our property or there's something going on an Orange County Schools community environment, that's how I'm interpreting. Like, folks want to know about that, and they want to.
I think
we know.
Right. Agreed.
I agree with you, Dr. Felder, and I think the request for this may have come from some students were in clubs or whatever in the back of the building, didn't know what was going on in the front of the building, and so I don't know. One conversation that you all and your team can think about, is it a district-wide text alert? Is it just school by school? I mean, did the whole district have to know that there were people marching outside Orange High School, or did it just have to be a text alert system going out to students and families at Orange High School? So, and I think we should leave that for you to sort through. And that's why I mentioned the Orange High School app. It's almost like we had a system that maybe could have been used for that. Okay. And then going ahead with counseling services, I know we have them, so it's not a question so much, do we have the counseling services? And I have to say, as a parent at Orange High, I feel like communication has really improved this year. Feed that we're hearing about concerns or events. But so is there some sort of plan of how counseling services are available following events such as these. And I know we haven't really had an event after that last one. So
Thank
where are
goodness.
we with this?
Right,
Yeah.
so that's one we certainly discussed and have a plan ready, and that is to do exactly what's stated there. So should incident occur, we will be sure to make it very clear, not only what services are available, but how to access them. Mhm. I mean, that's what typically happens. It did not happen in the incident that took place in the fall. And so.
Yeah.
that
And it was
was one
also
we
a
did-
Friday night.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, it would have been on
Right.
the Monday. Okay. I'm sorry, Dr. Felder, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, you didn't. You're fine.
Okay. Okay. And then this ongoing education, that was part of the purpose of the November 5th community engagement. And, you know, that had like 150 views. I don't know, or over 150 maybe, that YouTube recording of the meeting. So I know, Dr. Felder, you told me that you were sharing it with staff, but there was a lot of education that happened there with Dr. Squire
Yeah.
and Rebby Kern and the community conversations.
Yes. We do need to come back to that with regards to how do we take that conversation forward. Would love to do some work with, is it Rebby Kearns? Yes, in support of our LGBTQ students and staff, and so, and community actually. So there's more to come with regards to that. Just need to build out a plan. Mhm.
You know, on this one, there's some very specific things, you know, and I still haven't been able to get to it. I'd be lying if I said I've been working on it. There are new images that really fall in line with Confederate flags and swastikas that are emerging, that are symbols of, you know, hate group resides here. And I think it's a gray and black flag in particular, but I think we need to, we just need to alert people that if you see this, if you're driving around, you see this, might not be something you want to, might not be something, you might want to be on alert. So if you want, I'll find out, but I understand it's become pretty popular. And Dina, do you know, are you familiar with this imagery?
I have not. I have noticed some different flags and I don't know what they all mean, but it always like sends up my spidey sense when I start seeing different flags being flown.
Yeah.
I think this is where we're going to need the support of law enforcement to help us to stay on top of what to look for. And I'm sure we can get that kind of support, you know, regular updates on, you know, symbols, groups, et cetera, that we should just be aware of and what to do should we have any concerns.
I think during that meeting also, Ms. Squires also shared like a website. It might be Southern Poverty Law Center or somewhere where they try to keep a database of some of those things. But I think, yeah, maybe both of those sources. But I'm also thinking the piece of this that's like enable staff to know what to do. It's sort of like when you see a thing like a flag or a symbol or something in the school, and you're not sure, like, what do you do then? I'm thinking about it's sort of like that'll only come once in a while, but how do you know what to do then? And the importance of wrapping that into professional development during onboarding. And is there some little annual reminder, or is there, I don't know all of the internal websites that staff have access to, but is there a place where already they can sort of, where staff are already sort of know to go look in a certain place if they have a question along those lines?
Those are great ideas. That's helpful.
Well, I think we've overcome some hurdles in having open and honest dialogue about these topics, because we were definitely having them. So I think, just having this conversation today, we're continuing to do this resolve here about continuing open and honest dialogue. So thank you for checking in on these, Dr. Keeling and Dr. Felder. I know there are many layers of this to implement, so it all takes time.
Indeed, it does. Mhm.
Okay, so by the way, in this document I've shared with you are my super long, you'll see yourselves like quoted with what you shared in the meeting. So, but anyway, I wanted to go over some of, so this is the November 5th notes, and I just want to say here, so as our theme was that student sense of belonging, how hate group activity affects different student groups, how we need to respond. And we talked about how all groups are affected, including, white students and students being vulnerable, or the, corrosive effect it has on all of our students. So that was our kind of overarching theme. And we had Rebby Kern from Equality NC. We had Megan Squire from Elon University. And then Latondra led our community discussion, president of the Northern Orange NAACP. But I think I'm going to share some slides from Rebby Kern, this is a summary of some of her slides real quick. But she talks about some terminology so that we're using like the most accurate and preferred vocabulary. She talks about rates of increased suicidality and depression, particularly in LGBTQ+ youth of color. And that can manifest like being more likely to skip school, lower levels of feeling like they belong in depression, highest level of victimization in trans or gender nonconforming Black students, reporting, how comfortable they are reporting with staff. But I also want to get to some best practice slides. So I'm going to share this.
And hey, Carrie,
So-
I'm sorry, I just briefly, I have to hop at 11:15. I'm sorry, I can't stay for the whole time, but appreciated
Okay.
this call. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Does anyone want to go over any of these earlier slides, or can we go to the best practices piece?
I just have a general, we can go right to best practices, but these are general trends. These are not Orange County school trends, and I think the data is a little bit old. And so I think we have to, before we talk about best practices overall, I think we need to figure out how it applies to us and our students.
Wait, what was the last thing you said?
I think before we go to best practices, we should say what are the real problems facing our schools and our students. And so I'm just a little bit afraid that we over-engineer a certain perspective that may not be showing up in our schools in the same way. I leave that to Dina to tell us. Anyway, that's all. I'll just. You're following me? So I found some of the things, I thought the presentation was really interesting. I thought some of the things were a little dated.
Well, I mean, the data is from like 2021. So I don't know. I don't know what you mean about the data.
Presentation is from 2021. The statistics are not.
Human Rights Campaign 2021. I
That's
mean,
the
a lot of the
copyright.
Trevor Project data was from last year. This is from, but anyway, to your
But
point.
it's not from
point
us.
about- Mhm.
not-
Yeah, no,
it's
this
not from
is
us.
more like nationwide. Most of this was more nationwide. So Dr. Keeling, do you want to speak to that before we go to these best practices?
Sure, I will say, and you all will see the full equity assessment report, but one of the points that was raised was that our LGBTQ+ staff and students feel like they don't belong. and they don't feel welcome. And that was raised in a number of places in the assessment. And I do have a question. Do we have access to these slides, Ms. Doyle? Were they in
Yes,
the
and
board
I can,
meeting?
I sent it out and I can send it again. Rebby sent me, she sent me, and like the link has a whole bunch of stuff on it. Let me see if this is. So this is what she created, this page, centering queer, transgender, BIPOC youth. So it had the slide deck, and then it had at the bottom all these resources, these mental health resources, data and research, restorative justice. Some of the lesson plans were really good. There's one called like welcoming. There's a whole bunch of lesson plans from welcoming schools, and then things on gender identity. So I can send this back out. She said to share it with, staff and everyone present at the meeting. Okay, so we actually go to here. Okay, so I just wanted us to have some conversation around this, and it's okay if we aren't ready to agree to some of these things, but this, these were specific recommendations that they made. And so one is, okay, so this is, gosh, I just lost my train of thought. Gender identity, sexual orientation and gender identity, include that in policies wherever possible. They talk about having a suicide prevention policy, which I know we've been working on. And I actually want to bring some of those topics to a later community engagement meeting. Dr. Felder is going to talk about that with you today, with Ms. Cobb. So I feel like this is happening. Dr. Felder or Dr. Keelan, can you speak to, though, how much we weave LGBTQ youth specifically into some of our suicide prevention plans? Like, do we?
Yeah, I can't speak to that right now in terms of the degree to which it is integrated. I'm sorry we don't have Ms. Cobb with us today, but that's something I can certainly update the board on.
Okay, maybe I should send this to her as something to think about so that we can have an update on that later.
Yeah, or I'm happy to do that. So
Okay.
take the lead on following up.
Okay. There has been training, though, our trained mental health professionals. I feel like I've asked that question in the past, and we have had training. What kind of training have we had on, counselors, social workers, like our gender support plan? And
yeah. So I don't know if Dina has any insight on that.
I know that in the past, but we have to update it. We haven't done it recently. Safe space training with UNC, but there's new staff, right? So we need to revisit that. All of the counselors and social workers have been trained on the gender support policy and the plan and how to put those plans together with students and families. So that part is done.
okay, great.
So I have,
Go ahead, Bonnie.
what are we doing to help teachers or staff and kids who are uncomfortable with this?
Say more about that, please.
Well, so we say that we are in an inclusive environment, for all our LGBTQ kids. And just because we say it doesn't mean that people are comfortable with it. Right? So what are we doing to help people? And part of being comfortable with it is, how do you handle certain situations as they come up? So if a kid is being bullied because of his sexual identity, what do you do? Or if something comes to you and it really, when does what is the role of the staff versus what's the role when you refer back to the family? How do you answer questions about this? You know, are our staff comfortable with the topic?
I would say that we need to have more training across the board with staff. But when Ms. Cobb and I and the lead counselor and social worker met with the counselors and the social workers, we did speak to this because we recognize that everyone has their own beliefs even, and just their level of comfort with it. And one of the things that we discussed is, one, feel free to come and talk to Ms. Cobb, your lead counselor, your lead social worker, if you want to talk through it, because just because I don't believe in it, I may believe in kids and being a support for kids, but I need some help to navigate that for myself. So we have set that up where they can come and speak to them to help navigate. If you feel like I just cannot do it, then we have other people in place in the building that students can go to. So they don't have to go to someone who is just like, I don't want to do it. The biggest thing is, what we don't want is my belief, I don't agree with it, and then I inflict that somehow on the student. Like, it's okay if you just feel like I cannot do it. But we don't want that to then create a situation where the student just feels like, you know, your comments are being made or anything to that effect. So we did address that when we had that conversation. And one of the things when you go through training with UNC is they give you like a sticker to put on your door so that students know you are a safe space. And so you don't have to be that safe space. You know, that's okay. If you're wanting to work through it, then that is fine as well.
And if I could, and thank you for that, Dina. At the same time, we are also conveying that there are some expectations. I mean, there are, for example, in using preferred pronouns, that's not an option. You may not agree with that. You, for whatever reason, and you're entitled to not agree, but it is an expectation if you are an employee with Orange County Schools. And so we will support you, we will help you work through that, but you can't say, I'm sorry, I just disagree for whatever reason. Well, you can say that, but there's an expectation because we have policy behind that, that this is an expectation in this district.
Right, and I guess I'm trying to understand what we're, so if it's a safe space, is it also a safe space for a kid to work through their resistance?
Sure, absolutely. That's why our school counselors are there. And to Dina's point, we need to continue to do training. You know, it's because we want to, you know, support students who are struggling with or disagree, you know,
Right.
But we also want them to learn how to be accepting also, while also disagreeing. It's okay that you disagree, and that's fine. But even within that space, there's certain things you cannot do. And so how do we help you work through that?
Okay. I mean, I think that's really where the hard work is, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know, that's where the hard work is. That's where the if you will, the microaggressions are going to show up.
Mhm.
You know, the teachers know what they look like.
Mhm.
You
Students know what they look like.
What?
I was saying the students need to know what they look like, be
That's
able to
right.
name them.
Right.
Yep, and what to do about them, because that's not acceptable in this district. And so, you know, we're just scratching the surface on that kind of professional development. It takes time.
Yeah, I guess, you know, from a board perspective, I think sometimes we're very black and white about this. And while our values say we really want to be an inclusive environment, we don't always recognize how difficult that is, you know, and that challenges are real, and we want to be and we will be an inclusive environment when those challenges come forward and we're helping people work them out. So I'll just leave that there, but.
Okay. intersectional lens, I mean, that's like another layer. I know there's so much training and so many things you're trying to implement, and intersectional lens is like the next step, it seems. But I'm just gonna put that out there. We can grow towards having an intersectional lens towards different students' challenges, staff challenges.
I'm sorry, Carrie, what's an intersectional lens? I mean, what do you mean by that in this context?
So if a student is gay and also Black, you know, the most sensitive response would acknowledge that some of what they've just experienced, whether that's bullying or something else, may touch into multiple aspects of their identity, or right?
Yes, and that their experience as someone who has these intersection of identities may show up differently. If I'm LGBTQ plus and white, if I'm LGBTQ plus and BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, person of color, my experiences and the inequities that I face, there may be added layers to that. And so it's not just enough to say, oh, we're just going to address LGBTQIA. To Rebbie's point, where she has a couple of points down, QT, the BIPOC, right? That added layer of that, or it could be a woman and a person of color. So I'm not only dealing with the inequities that face women, I'm dealing with the inequities that face women and being a person of color, right? So that's what that intersectional lens means.
And some of Rebbie's data spoke to, which I think came from the Trevor Project, but spoke to things like, you know, white LGBTQ people report this level of difficulty with law enforcement, and Black or other people of color who are LGBTQ report, you know, this higher level, you know, whether it's with law enforcement or job discrimination or just different things. Like they had data to support this idea of why it's important to recognize intersectional experiences people have. I know that we've worked over a number of years to incorporate restorative justice practices in our schools, and that at one point in time, some schools were doing that more across the board than others. Where is that all in your realm, Dr. Keeling?
That's in Ms. Cobb's realm.
Okay.
So let me ask another dumb question. I can't help it. So in today's world, there's a coolness around gender fluidity, right? Someone told me that Durham Public Schools actually, in every assignment in Canvas, the child is allowed to put in their preferred pronoun because it changes all the time. But when I look at our kids, I see kids that are in foster care. I think kids that live with their grandparents. I see kids who have drugs at home. I see kids that are dealing with all kinds of things that make them, that marginalize them, if you will. And so how do you, and I know our counselors are dealing with all that. You know, you walk into school, they know exactly what a divorce, you know, they know all of that. So I'm just a little concerned that we isolate certain groups without really understanding. You know, our student population really has lots of things that, you know, make kids different and uncomfortable about who they are.
Yeah. Okay. This past year, we have established, we started with a gender support policy, and then it has gone to plans and guidelines for staff. And you spoke to that, Dr. Keeling. Confidential pathways, aside from the Say Something app, do we feel like we have the confidential pathways in place for reporting?
So we actually just did a training with staff on reporting racial incidents and acts of intolerance. And I think that's a great first step, is that now we're all on the same page. And we made staff aware that students may come to administrators, they may come to a teacher to report, they may use that Say Something app to report. I think that the more that we address issues as they come up, the more safe students will feel to speak up about them. So we have put some pathways in place for that reporting.
Yeah, and if I could just add that, so the training that Dean is referring to was for district administrators. There's still layers of training that need to occur so that this training reaches classroom teachers, but also, and all staff, but also we want our students to, be educated around microaggressions, what they are, and how to report those. So there's still a lot of work to be done, is what I'm saying. And we have taken some initial steps towards that, but there's more work to be done.
Okay. And this, I'm sorry, I'm just rushing us a little bit so we at least see what all these are. In fact, if you want to, we could just take a minute to read these last 10 ones and comment on or ask about ones that you want to comment or ask about. I think the curricular resources, that was really part of why we supported as a board keeping those books.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that this is one area that staff is really struggling with, not in terms of not wanting to do it, in terms of the pushback that happens and just really not knowing how to navigate that and to balance wanting to have the resources in place for students, wanting to create the space to have these conversations and to infuse it into curriculum as it being culturally relevant, because our students come from all different home situations as well as their own identities, right? So, and then just the students who, to your point around students that are just saying, I just want to learn about other people. Like our students are way more advanced than us. I think I told Ms. Doyle, my own daughters, like, I love Alexa, I have a Fire Stick, and I said to my daughters, I love her. And my daughter was like, how do you know that Alexa identifies as a female? And I was like, you are so correct. So they are so beyond us, but it is, and I don't know what the response is. I do think it is a full community response. I don't think it's something just within Orange County schools, that we make sure staff have those layers of support of when that pushback happens, because it happens a lot around this, how they continue to do this work.
Thank you, Dr. Killing. I want to jump to what I think is a really hard one and a really important one, and that is the comprehensive inclusive sexual health education. And I feel like that's going to be really difficult. To Bonnie's point about, this is going to be hard for people. Not everyone's going to agree with this, but at the same time, at this point, we have like non-binary kids, maybe 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and they're currently expected to go pick, I'll go do sex ed with the girls or I'll go do sex ed with the boys. Like at the most rudimentary level, I don't think, from what I've heard from parents, we have a safe option for students who identify as non-binary. So what is set up for everyone to have a safe place to have those classes at all? And I know parents can opt out. So I guess there's an option of parents saying, my child's not comfortable with either class, so I will opt out of sex ed. But I think we can do better than that. And I've heard that It's too bad that Sarah's not here because she had shared a resource with me. I feel like that was a question I wanted to ask Rebby about, but I didn't know. I wanted to have a question with us first. But I heard that the Women's Center maybe in Chapel Hill has someone who does really inclusive sexual education instruction. I just feel like this is a big topic, but I at least want to bring it up as something I think is really important, and I don't think we've touched it yet in terms of being inclusive.
The topic it's
I'm sorry, Bonnie, I couldn't hear you.
the topic, it's a scary topic. It's a topic that will really inflame people. There's a question about, what are kids comfortable with, when it's a weird thing. We'll tolerate violence to the extreme, but sex is really off limits. And so would girls be comfortable in sex education class with a trans female, right? I mean, or is it really critical for a trans female to get sex education? I mean, I just don't know. And I wonder what the North Carolina course of study suggests. And I just think we have to be a little careful if we're going to go past it, because we're going to get, that's all. I just am, it's a question that we need to go very slowly and carefully with.
Dr. Felder, Dr. Keeling, do you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I do think that there's a lot of work to be done with regards to this particular topic. And I do agree that it's not okay that the only option right now would be to opt out, and would need to know more about what resources are out there and what would be most appropriate for us. So it's, and I'm not sure that we've begun to dig into identifying other curriculum, et cetera. So, but yeah, it's one that we certainly will need to take some action on soon.
Okay.
I don't
Okay,
know,
and
Dr.
last-
Keeling had anything else to
Oh,
add?
yeah, sorry, go ahead,
To
Dr.
work
Keeling.
with Ms. Cobb and others.
I don't have anything to add to that.
Just to wrap up as we're closing out the hour here, things like, I feel like I saw something recently from the district or my kid's school or something. I do feel like we're starting to incorporate more inclusive forms and data. So here's an example that Rebby shared of, really inclusive way to ask questions. And so I think we just need to wrap up, even though we could go farther. In terms of the student forums, I don't feel like we really have time to get into that, but I do want to mention, Bonnie, and see if you're okay with this as a committee member. I wanted to just I'd send a thank you to the principals, but sending a little note, almost to the students, to the different school counselors that maybe can be emailed out to the students who joined us, just saying, we are circling back. We really appreciated their joining us. Staff is pulling together student feedback with other student feedback they got from other settings, and that we just want them to know that we haven't just moved on. I don't know how I'd say that, but are you okay with a communication like that going out, Bonnie?
Yeah, that's fine. It's always good to thank people for participating, and I just think we have to be really careful about creating a subgroup of elite students who are involved in everything, and that excludes others. and that excludes certain voices and it excludes certain perspectives. So certainly thanking people for helping is great, but we have work to do to create a broader spectrum of perspective.
Yeah, and I mean, the counselors are the ones who designed that group of students. You know, I didn't know most of the students. I didn't, ask them. So I know the goal was to have a really inclusive cross section, but it may be that, certain people were picked because they usually are willing to participate. And so they tend to be active participants rather than the less active participants. So another question I want to come back to as board members is what other ways are there for us to invite student voices broadly, aside from another round of the student forums?
Yeah, my experience says that you go into their space, that people are more comfortable in their home than they are in your home. And so to the extent that we can observe and see what's happening, and Carrie, I actually loved your idea that you mentioned at the retreat of assigning board members to schools, because then we build the relationships and then people become more comfortable with us. And by the way, it helps people, it helps to normalize power for our kids. And I think that's important too. I'm going to be picking up garbage, I think, at Gravely Hill Middle School, which I do lunch duty now, but now I'm going to start picking up garbage to see because it's needed. And so why not?
That's good.
Yeah, it is
That
good.
invites open dialogue for sure. Okay. So I know that I need to share, I'll share Rebby's files. I'll send those out again to Dr. Felder, Dr. Keeling, Ms. Cobb, and there's a number of things we'll circle back on. We should, Dr. Keeling, maybe we can talk about bringing back the equity resolution and going through that. And I think that's where we are.
Carrie, when you share that, could you share it in the context that these are challenging, this is a challenging topic, so that people don't, I could just imagine we're pushing an agenda, we're pushing an agenda language, you know what I mean? And I don't want that. I think we really are trying to create an inclusive environment, and this is really good information for that. But how do we recognize for people that we appreciate that you may be uncomfortable with some of this, and we want to make sure we're there to help you work that out.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but who are you thinking of? Because I'm just sending it to Dr. Felder, Dr. Keeling, Ms. Cobb, and board members.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm not
I
sure.
thought it was going to eventually go to staff. That the proposal was distributed to.
Oh, that's, I'm not doing, I mean, I don't know. That's beyond me.
Okay. Then I don't care.
But I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying, that, this would be difficult to suddenly implement everything all at once, for sure. Okay, any closing comments before we adjourn?
Just the one item I had around the resolutions. And so would the next family engagement meeting be an opportunity to provide the board an update on all of the resolutions in terms of where we are with regards to taking action? Is that
that'd be
the
great.
request is? Okay.
And also, I had in my mind next month, Melanie Stowe and Sandra Blefko are joining us and talking about family liaisons and navigators. And so that would also be a time where it would be good to bring the newest resolution about English language learners and just take a look at that. Like, some of it I know is supportive language, but there were some specifics in terms of student achievement goals and metrics. And so if we could touch on that resolution as well when we have that topic that relates to it.
We'll bring them all back.
So,
Okay.
so I would be interested in hearing more about the proposed metrics for family engagement in the strategic plan. Because I presume we're the committee that does that. And I'm really interested, like when we do surveys or when we do anything, who are we reaching? Who's participating? Who's engaging? You know, and I think I mentioned to you, Carrie, I just learned that there's a WhatsApp group with a couple hundred Hispanic parents that has formed. And so they almost have created their own PTA, if you will. And that's really exciting to hear that. But, and we have this new texting feature, and who's signing up for that? You know, so I really want to know, are people engaging, who's engaging in the things that we're doing? Right, so it says, are we reaching the people we're trying to reach?
And I think to add on to that, Ms. Hauser, who's engaging and what are we doing to engage those who are not?
Yep.
I
And that
think
should-
that's a question. I think that's a question Melanie will definitely want to speak to, and that's a question I know that she is processing a lot. That comes up in our flamboyant meetings. So that's a good kind of question for couching things, I think.
Yes, that's the context. That's a great context. And it should become the mission, right? That we, you know, the goal is to become irrelevant, and we become irrelevant when families are engaging every day in the work of their schools in the district.
Well, thank you for your time today. I feel like I felt bad bringing a little bit of a slog of a meeting to everybody, but you know, if we just put stuff out there and don't circle back, we're not gonna do it. So, so thank you for your time and sharing. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, second, we are adjourned.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
all.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.